Ladies and gents, it's Tuesday, it's booge, it's your dad's balls, it's time for an alternative paper review. First up this morning, the Daily Mirror. Infected blood scandal. Make guilty face justice. Now, there's a lot to disagree with the general editorial standards of the Daily Mirror, their history of phone hacking, their weirdly lefty but royalist editorial line that they appear to have taken. But on this, at least, we do share some common ground. This is a catastrophic failure by the NHS, by subsequent governments. There was a callous lack of sympathy, there were cover-ups, there was deleted evidence. And now, to be fair to the Daily Mirror, they are attempting to move the story on a bit. Now, it's not so much about what happened, but what justice can these people expect to see? Which, just on that alone, sets it firmly apart from its right-wing competitors, because just look at the laziness with these headlines. The Times says Britain's day of shame. A day of shame for the British state, says the Telegraph. Day that shames the British state. This is a day of shame. Which is a bit like, yeah, it is. But, I mean, aren't you lot supposed to be English grads? Have none of you got a thesaurus? Did none of you learn how to paraphrase? I think if I was a political editor and I was covering this story, 30,000 people impacted, affected, killed, mourned for. I think if I was in a WhatsApp group with the other political editors, I think I'd be like, what are you going with? Are you a day of shame? Okay, what are you going to... You're doing a day of shame as well? Okay, well, maybe I'll be a bit different. Maybe I'll go with... a national embarrassment, or a very British genocide. Meanwhile, from this state-sponsored murder to another, The Guardian report that the International Criminal Court have issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Nethanyahu and for the leaders of Hamas. While the Telegraph go one further and suggest that the US and Biden personally have condemned the ICC. So, clearly, this is the story that Hamas's leaders, working in tandem with Iran, who reportedly backed the attack, they went into Israel, kidnapped and murdered loads of Israeli kids. Then Israel go into Gaza and the West Bank. Now, obviously, they're very angry and they're just trying to get their kids back, but also they have murdered unarmed civilians and people waving white flags. They've bombed hospitals and schools. They say the terrorists are hiding in these places, but when people go into them, they find dead bodies tied up with their hands behind their back. They've obstructed food convoys, they've stopped fresh water getting in, people are starving. And so the ICC is saying you've deliberately done these things as a means to apply pressure to reach your military goals, and that's illegal. But they also say Hamas have committed atrocities and they too should be hauled in front of the International Criminal Court. But obviously for the leaders of Hamas, that is significantly less detrimental to their geopolitical standing. Israel and Netanyahu specifically would now, in theory, be prohibited from travelling to the UK. And any other signatory country that's a party to the ICC. But to be fair to Benji, he has responded to this. He's put out a statement, an address, if you will, in which he goes through all of the evidence that was provided to the ICC and indeed every one of the 17 paragraphs of the verdict. And he responds to it like this. He says, look, I am so sorry for the way that things have gone down on my watch, under the command of my military. I am hollowed out with grief. I don't think I will ever be able to sleep a wink at night again because of the atrocities that we've allowed to happen. However, there are some inaccuracies in here, and I look forward, personally, to flying to the ICC because I have such faith in due process and indeed the institution of the International Criminal Court. I've got such faith in it that I will fly there personally and I will clear my name. I'm just kidding. Of course he hasn't said that. He hasn't said any of it. What has he said? He said that the ICC is a farce. And he says that what they've decided, this verdict, this arrest warrant, if you will, that puts it in line with the very worst of what took place in the Second World War. And I know this has appeared to be a tricky thing for Western governments and their opposition parties to navigate, hasn't it? Because even just in the UK, you've got people over here like Robert Jenrick, Suella Braverman, Dan Hodges, who pretend that anyone who's protesting to help people in Gaza is somehow hating Jewish people. Conversely, if you post a tweet that says, I just hope that some of the Jewish kids make it back to Israel alive, you get clapbacks from people like, oh, well, why do you hate Muslims, you EDL piece of You know, it seems curiously difficult to inhabit a place of nuance. One where you could say, you know what, I think Hamas are butcherers and they probably need removing. But also, I think Netanyahu is a genocidal maniac and he probably needs removing. And any discussion about having a two-state solution where these people can live side by side without murdering each other will probably need to start with the unseating of those in power who reciprocally do not want the other one to exist. That appears to be insurmountably difficult messaging for political leaders. But I know all of this seems really depressing, but there is still some hope, okay? Because the ICC want to arrest him, but Biden says, you better not arrest my boy Benji. You know, you got this country saying, well, we would turn him into the ICC. You got another country saying, oh, we can't turn him in. He's Jewish. That's anti-Semitism. You've got all this instability and volatility and what is it now, like 50, 60,000 dead in Gaza? Like the whole thing seems hopeless, but there is still some hope, guys, okay? Even though it seems like none of the political leaders want to take responsibility, and even though there are arrest warrants and, you know, people debating whether or not they would adhere to them, even though they are signatories, even though there's been tens of thousands of people murdered, innocent people murdered, just think of it this way. All it will take is another 2, maybe 3 decades. And if you get an opposition Israeli party about to take power from the status quo, then the status quo party in Israel might carpet bomb the media and demand justice. We demand justice. Finally, they'll say, in a right thing for the wrong reasons sort of capacity.